we discuss the state of the opposition today, Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP. Let's turn though to the news that's breaking at the moment, that big story that's just broken in Rajasthan, where it appears that Sachin Pilot's revolt could be over. That's right, a short while ago, the Congress has issued a statement on Sachin Pilot's meeting with Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi. Congress says that Sachin Pilot and the Gandhis had a frank and conclusive discussion where Sachin Pilot expressed his grievances in detail. A three-member committee is to be set up to address the issues raised by the Pilot camp. Meanwhile, Pilot camp MLAs lodged in Gurugram resort are likely now to leave for Jaipur tonight. Remember, assembly session was there on the 14th and there was a question mark whether the Gehlot government could fall. But now it appears it's Sachin Pilot who has clearly blinked first and sought a compromise at this moment. Let's go to our correspondents on the field. National Affairs Editor Rahul Srivastav is with us, as is Devur Ankur Vadava there in Jaipur. First, you, Rahul Srivastav, to try and understand why Sachin Pilot seems to have taken 2 steps back. Am I to understand he didn't have the requisite MLAs to try and bring down the Gehlot government? Did the BJP decide not to play ball with him? What is the reason for his decision to eventually go back into the Congress fold?
Rajdeep, I think he flew immaturely. His wings, the pilot's wings, were not really enough for him to fly out. The BJP was not backing him, not because the BJP didn't want to. I think the BJP really wanted to get one more state, even though riding Sachin Pilot's back. But the Vasundhara Raje factor proved very strong, because Vasundhara Raje is almost like a regional satrap. So worried was the BJP that when it took some MLAs who were vulnerable category to Porbandar in Gujarat for a safekeeping, some of the MLAs loyal to Vasundhara Raje even refused to go. So that was where the BJP's worry was, that in case it is wanting to topple Ashok Gehlot, help out Sachin Pilot, in the process, it may have rebellion in its own ranks and defections. The BJP didn't want that. Second, Sachin Pilot numbers were there, but they were not enough to topple Ashok Gehlot. The third, I think Ashok Gehlot is a wily customer. And third, I think somewhere Sachin Pilot didn't totally go into rebelling against the party gear. He kept himself into that little safe zone of rebelling against Ashok Gehlot and his style of functioning. So if Ashok Gehlot called him Angrezi speaking, Khubsurat and everything, he never indulged in that. He never attacked the party. So eventually what one can say is, a lot of things didn't work out for us, Sachin Pilot. I think eventually whether it is an honorable re-entry or a surrender by Sachin Pilot will depend on the fine details of this arrangement which is being worked on Rahul Gandhi in form of a committee.
Right.
There is some assurance about some people loyal to Sachin Pilot getting ministerial berth. But is there some assurance on Sachin Pilot as the future chief ministerial face? I think that will be critical, because if that is so, that means Ashok Gehlot has suffered certain body blows. Let me take that to Devankur Vadava. You're outside the Chief Minister's office. Is there a sense of relief for Ashok Gehlot, who's been fighting till the very end to save his government, took his MLAs to Jaisalmer, kept them earlier in Fairmount Hotel in Jaipur? Does he now feel that the worst is over?
Well, a huge sense of relief in the Ashok Gehlot camp, because remember, Rajdeep, even if Gehlot would have managed to scrape through the assembly session that begins on August 14, even then a sword would have kept hanging over his government for the remaining tenure of about 3.5 years, because it had only a wafer-thin majority of 2 MLAs. And that is why Gehlot always knew that if he did not have at least 5 to 8 MLAs from the Pilot camp returning to his side, then his government will always be in a state of jeopardy. And that is why he was always, maintaining a soft stand, at least towards the last 10 days. One experienced that during his speeches. Gehlot mentioned that if the rebel MLAs approach the party high command, and if the party high command forgives them, then he's willing to have them back with open arms. Remember, earlier he mentioned that Pilot is a nakara, is a nikamma, is a good for nothing. But of late, he was there was a perceptible change in stance as far as Ashok Gehlot was concerned,
Right.
because he knew that as far as the numbers were concerned, as I mentioned, even if he managed to scrape through, a sword would have kept hanging over his government, and he did not want that.
So-
He could not have had 10 to 12 police personnel guarding each and every MLAs for the remaining 3.5 years or thereabouts.
sense-
And that is why he wanted to ensure that his government was safe.
In a sense, what you're saying is both sides have tried to cut their losses. Both sides, in a way, have tried to avoid the kind of confrontation, because really neither, beyond a point, was in a position to guarantee full success. And interestingly, the BJP also doesn't seem to have got its game plan working in Rajasthan in the manner that they did in Madhya Pradesh only a few months ago. Rahul Srivastav and Devankur Vadava will come back to you for more on that big story, because the state of the Congress is actually our top focus. Because what's happened is, remember, this weekend, Sonia Gandhi, it was announced, will continue as the Congress's interim chief. Senior Congress leader Abhishek Manu Singhvi stating that Sonia will remain at the helm till a new president is chosen. And it was said that until a process is put in place, she will continue. Remember, therefore, there is a question mark as to who will be the next Congress president after Rahul Gandhi resigned after that 2019 Lok Sabha poll defeat. So that's the other big story that's coming in. And on that story, one of the few who've spoken out openly is the senior Congress leader, Shashi Tharoor. He's joining me as my first newsmaker this evening. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Tharoor. You have been among the few to come out, Dr. Tharoor, speak openly, and even going to the extent to say it is unfair for Sonia Gandhi to force her to continue as Congress president, interim Congress president. It almost seems as if she's doing some kind of a favor to the Congress, Dr. Tharoor, by continuing as an interim Congress chief.
Well, she is, Rajdeep. When you think about the extraordinary burden she's already borne for 2 decades as Congress president, then finally had an opportunity to hand over the reins in December 2017. And a year and a half later, she's stuck with the job again. And I think she's actually been an active interim president. We, the Lok Sabha MPs, have had a meeting with her during the lockdown by virtual means. The Rajya Sabha MPs had a meeting with her. She's had other consultations with party colleagues virtually and so on. But I do believe it is unfair to her to expect her to carry this burden indefinitely. And I think that you guys in the media have also created a public perception that the Congress is adrift and rudderless. And I think the perception is now so widespread and so universally held by our critics as well as our supporters in the media that we would really need to address it and show that we're capable of taking up the challenge of a credible national opposition. This is why I feel that the time has come for us to move from an interim arrangement to a full-term and full-time president.
You know, I'll come, Dr. Tharoor, in a moment to the full-term, full-time president. The fact, though, is, Dr. Tharoor, your party had a full year and more to get your act together. That is exactly why the media today is saying that the Congress for the last 15 months appears rudderless. I mean, an interim chief is no substitute for a full-time party president.
Well, I think many of us in the party have been feeling the impatience that your question alludes to, Rajdeep. And I'm not speaking alone here. Perhaps I'm speaking openly and outside, since I don't have an internal forum within which to speak. I'm not a member of the working committee, for instance, upon whom it was incumbent to take the necessary steps in this regard. But many leaders I've spoken to, some of whom are very senior, spent lifetimes in the organization, have made it clear that they all feel that it's time now to settle this issue and to move on. And the reason for this, by the way, is not about individuals or positions or power structures. It's about the fact that we must be a credible national alternative to the misrule that's taking place in Delhi. And that requires a Congress party which stands for all the right values and principles that Indians have long embraced, of inclusion, of progress, of bringing everyone along irrespective of language and region and caste, of actually standing up for the right things. That party, the Congress party, must be given a chance to show that it's revitalized, re-energized, and ready to take on whatever this government will fling at us.
You know, but
that is what some of us feel we haven't had a chance to do.
You know, but Dr. Tharoor, the truth is also that there is a belief in general that Sonia Gandhi is keeping the seat of Congress president warm for Rahul Gandhi, who resigned and is now reluctant to return. The message, therefore, that also goes out is that the Congress can't do without the Gandhis, that you have to wait for Rahul, that the party can't look beyond the Gandhis. I mean, what kind of a message is that for a modern political party?
Rajdeep, let me say, first of all, there's a clear factual common sense answer here, which is that, of course, if Rahul Gandhi is ready to resume the leadership, all he has to do is withdraw his resignation. He was elected in December 17 to serve. His resignation was accepted with great reluctance by the working committee, and that too with an interim arrangement. If he were to say tomorrow, I'm withdrawing my resignation, the working committee will gladly, I'm sure, I'm not in it, but I'm sure, will say, we accept your withdrawal, please take over, and that's the end of the story. And because that will be welcomed widely by the party rank and file and party workers, I don't think that anyone is making an issue of that. The problem is that if he doesn't want it, then we have to take action. And that action must be to create a process or a system through which we can exist as leadership issue.
Dr. Tharoor, where in the world does a political party, forget or indeed any company or institution, wait for an individual to decide for 15 months whether he or she wants to come back? Anywhere else by now a process of election or any other way of choosing a leader would have been put in place. That hasn't happened.
Well, listen, that's pretty much what some of us are saying, that if Rahul ji wants it, he was the last incumbent, he should pick up the reins and run. He's been doing a great job, I think, during the lockdown in articulating fiercely opposition and criticism of the misdeeds and mistakes of this government. And I think, in all fairness, if he wants to continue with that as president, the party would welcome it. And I think many in the opposition have been applauding it, because frankly, very few others are speaking so clearly and so loudly and so consistently. But if he says, listen, I'm doing my own thing this way, but I don't want the burden of actually running the party, then I don't think we should wait indefinitely. And many of us feel that we don't want to wait indefinitely.
Dr. Tharoor, the fact is he has already said that. Rahul Gandhi has already said that he doesn't want to take, he's given enough indications he doesn't want to take the burden of Congress president. Therefore, I ask you, why can't a Shashi Tharoor or whoever else say, I'm putting up my hand, let's have elections like good old days, let's elect a party president, let's have a new, perhaps a new Congress.
We have many leaders, so don't take any individual names, and certainly not mine, because there are people with lots and lots of organizational and political experience who could offer themselves once there is a process within which they can offer themselves. Where is the process? You said, I'm putting myself forward for what? I mean, there's got to be an announced election. There is a procedure. For example, when Rahul Gandhi was elected, Sonia Gandhi announced she was stepping down. There was an electoral process within the party. The AICC has a committee, an election committee, like our own election commission, which then called for nominations. Rahul Gandhi's nomination was signed by pretty much every PCC in the country. And it was an uncontested election, but there was a process. If at that time somebody wanted to stand up.
No, Dr. Tharoor, you keep harping on this word process. Let me tell you that let me remind you that the Congress has not had a proper election to the Congress Working Committee now for over 20 years. You have an unelected Congress Working Committee, an interim president, a Rahul Gandhi who is your de facto leader but will not take up the de jure responsibility of Congress president. What is this process you're waiting for? Why can't you have, as any other party in the world would have, a democratically elected president and CWC members elected?
We can, if the party leadership and the working committee will announce it. If they say tomorrow, okay, next month there's going to be an election, here's the procedures, nominations may be filled in this form with so many nominees, I think some people will rise. I mean, the working committee is not a fully elected body. Constitutionally, there are three categories of members. There are the elected members, there are the appointed members or permanent members, and then there are the permanent invitees. And I think that's a fair balance, because in an election in a party as large and diverse as us, we may not be able to get everyone to reflect the full diversity of the party. So the election, for example, doesn't produce enough women winners or enough Southern winners or enough people from certain minorities or tribes or whatever. The president can use the appointed positions to make up the balance. So I don't think there's a problem with a mixture of election and appointment. But there are positions that are called elected positions, which have historically been elected, but which for the last, as you said, a couple of decades have been filled by appointments. And that's why I've been advocating. It's not new. I've been advocating it for more than a year. Within the constitution of the country, that we should elect the members.
No, I take your point, Dr. Tharoor. I want to ask you an honest question. Who is, in your view, best suited to take on Narendra Modi? Let's be honest here. Rahul Gandhi tried, failed in 2014, certainly in 2019. Across the world, when you lose twice as an opposition leader, you give space to another leader. Who do you then think can take on Mr. Modi? Are you saying that there is nobody other than a Gandhi family member or Rahul Gandhi who can take on Modi as far as the Congress is concerned?
Now, I think you're asking the wrong question. The question is not who will take on Mr. Modi. It's what will the party do to ready itself to take on Modi with whoever is going to be the face of the party. It may well be Rahul Gandhi, but the party has to get its act together, articulate defiantly for the next 3 years the very, very strong principles that have animated us. The alternate vision of India I was talking about, an inclusive and pluralist vision that, in my view, truly reflects the heart and soul of the country. The ideology of an inclusive and progressive party, liberal and centrist in its orientation, committed to social justice and individual freedoms, and patriotic. Why should we cede nationalism to the BJP? We are the party of Indian nationalism. We are patriotic, and our record shows it in our determination to protect national security and at the same time to promote human security. All of this has great appeal if it's projected properly. And to do that, irrespective of who the individual is, the party has to get its act together. We can't leave the national field uncontested for the BJP's distorted, bigoted, narrow-minded version of what India stands for. So I believe, listen, don't forget, the party has bounced back many times before. With proper focus, it can bounce back again. India needs a credible national alternative. Only the Congress can provide it. And so I would urge any friends like Sachin Pilot or anyone else who may be letting their frustrations boil over to stay in the party and struggle with us for a better India. And we need an effective Congress to be able to do that. I believe we can. We just need that decision to be taken.
The good news, Dr. Tharoor, for you today is it appears that Sachin Pilot has decided to stay on. The question is whether he, whether you or any of the others, Manish Tiwari, I could put a number of names who represent the communicative face of the Congress, a slightly younger, more modernist face of the Congress, will they ever be given those opportunities? I ask you, will a Pilot, a Tharoor, a Manish Tiwari get the opportunities today with the Congress? Is the Congress going to give them the space, or will the Congress still be tied up to the old guard, or will these opportunities at the top only stay with one family?
There are some questions you ask, I think, to which you don't really expect an answer. So we'll leave it at that. But you've asked a question that clearly you're right to ask. And as far as I'm concerned, I believe that everyone in the party has the opportunities that they can create within the systems made available by the party. My opportunities are as an MP. Sachin's was in the state government of Rajasthan. Manish's is also as an MP. And so on and so on. Manish has also had before that the Youth Congress and the NSTY and so on. So people have had different platforms in which they can contribute to realizing these goals and these visions. It's not that we've been bereft of opportunities. I'm a third-term MP, and I've been running on the very platform I articulated in answering your question. This is what I say to my voters that I'm saying to you now, and voters have accepted it. They want this kind of politics. We need to get that message across the rest of India as well, and I think that there are people who can do it, but we need to create a process where we can start focusing on that, rather than have all of you in the media only writing about us being adrift. And that's something that we have to stop that perception, and the way to stop it is by settling this issue right.
You know, Dr. Tharoor, I'm going to leave the media bashing for another day, as a topic for another day. But thank you for now, for so much, for speaking to us on what you believe is the way ahead for the country's principal opposition party. Thanks very much on a day when Sachin Pilot, it appears, has decided to stay back in the Congress fold. Now, I want to widen this debate because this was an issue that we asked on Mood of the Nation. Our 2020 August Mood of the Nation has asked the question, who is the best person to take on the role of opposition leader? I'm going to be joined by Mani Shankar Iyer, the Congress leader, Kaushik Deka, senior editor, India Today, who tracks the Congress, and Sanjay Jha, the former spokesperson of the Congress, who has been suspended. And I'm going to raise that question, and this is what our survey said. This is what the India Today Mood of the Nation said. We asked, how would you assess Congress's role as an opposition party? 9% said outstanding, 35% said good. So you add the two, it's about 44. Average said 32 and poor said 21. So 53% said the Congress's performance was either average or poor as an opposition party. How would you rate Sonia Gandhi's role as Congress president? Outstanding was just 8%, good was 33, add the two, it's 41%, average 35 and poor 20. So you add the two, it's again 55%, don't know was 4%. With leaders exiting and rebelling, is the Congress heading towards death? And this is a worry for the Congress. Yes said 47%. So the perception is that the Congress is a declining force. No said 38%. Don't know said 15%. Who is best suited to revive the Congress? Now, in August 2020 and Jan 2020, in the mood of the nation, these were the numbers. Rahul Gandhi remains more or less the same at 23%. He was earlier 24%. Manmohan Singh is the big climber. He was 10% in January. Now he's up to 18%. Sonia Gandhi was 11% in January, up to 14%. And Priyanka Gandhi remains where she is, 14%. What do you think of Rahul Gandhi's criticism of Modi government during the pandemic? Made sense, said 25%. Baseless allegations, 38%. Wanted publicity, said 23%. And didn't take note of it, was 15%. We'll come to the other questions in a moment, but I want to focus on what this poll is raising at the moment. Manishankar Iyer, 47% are saying the Congress is heading towards death. That should worry you as someone who's been one of the long-standing soldiers of your party. This is perceptional. But there's a sense that the Congress at the moment is a party in decline.
I know that your poll has shown that 47% feel that the Congress is irreversibly in decline. I'm not concerned with whether the party is in decline or not. I'm much more concerned with the Congress remaining, and still is today, the only national alternative to the BJP. And in these circumstances, I think we should strengthen ourselves. And I don't think that is a matter of personalities. I think it is a matter of ideology. I have the example before me of the BJP. It was down to 2 seats in 1984, but they did not shift their position. And the consequence was that some 30, 40 years later, they came to power. I don't think whether we are going to come back to power or not depends on who's leading the party, but whether the party is going to be true to itself. And in this regard, as a self-confessed secular fundamentalist, it seems to me that unless we are rigidly secular, we are not going to provide an ideological alternative that the voters may, if not today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps day after, turn to. Because what is happening at the moment under Mr. Modi is more or less what was happening under Hitler in Germany. There's an article today which has shown that the level of satisfaction with Mr. Hitler in 1939 was approximately what Mr. Modi, according to your poll, is enjoying today. So I say I'm more interested in keeping my party on the right ideological track, because that is the way to come to power. And fiddling with personalities is only, it may be breaking news, but it's not fundamental to the life of the party.
Let me take what you've said to Sanjay Jha. You heard there Manishankar Iyer seeming to suggest that the real challenge is ideological for a party like the Congress. It's not about leadership. Our poll clearly is showing at the moment that when it comes to leadership, there are those who are questioning both Sonia Gandhi continuing as an interim president, uncertainty whether Rahul Gandhi will take over. Is that the problem? Is the problem at the top? Or is the problem, as Manishankar Iyer seems to suggest, just in the ideological core of the party, which is confused?
Rajdeep, I agree with Mr. Iyer to the extent that there is an ideological obfuscation within the party. And on that note, I don't think I will dispute whatever he's mentioned. In fact, he and I have the privilege of being suspended by the Congress party, so we are both probably pretty much in empathy with each other. The two aspects that we cannot ignore, though, are also organizational and leadership. And where organizational is concerned, today the reality of the Congress party is it's got great grassroots penetration. As Mr. Iyer is probably better aware than possibly me, it's got talented people, very sincere workers who actually, basically compromise on their own lifestyle, on their own earnings to dedicate their time for the party, who today are feeling demoralized, devastated with the fact that there is no direction and there therefore is no future. And the leadership issue is frankly the elephant in the room that very few Congress leaders are willing to bite the bullet on. I have done it, and I have done so without worrying about the consequences of what the party will do to me.
Let's be very clear. When you say that leadership is the elephant in the room, you believe that the Congress must look for a non-Gandhi family member as the leader? I had Shashi Tharoor just now who evaded that question. He said it is for Rahul Gandhi to decide. What is your view?
Well, Rajdeep, I'm not going to duck or dodge this question. I'll tell you why. I do believe that the Congress party is internally, in principle, no longer in practice, unfortunately, it does have a principle ethos of internal democracy. The fact is that it is dead. And when I say it's dead, I really mean it's inanimate. And for the life of me, in the last 5-6 years, nobody is really willing to listen to you if you are not very close to the high command. These are the truths that we need to embrace. Point number 2. I do believe that when Mr. Gandhi resigned, he was aware of his term ahead. And I have been, by the way, one of the most vocal supporters of Mr. Gandhi when his chips were down and people were rubbishing him and ridiculing him. So I have a lot of concern and solicitude for him, which is why I'm saying so on your channel, that when Mr. Gandhi resigned, I thought he elevated politics. I'm in the Congress party because of Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka and Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. So why should I actually come on your channel and tell you that it's actually, in a great number of ways, politically opportune for the Gandhi family to take a backseat and deflect 2 criticisms that come their way. Number 1, that it's become a dynastic party. Now, we cannot deny, Mr. Iyer will also agree, that you have a Congress working committee that has been having no elections since 1997. Surely the Congress has enough talent to feature new people. And with due respects to Mrs. Gandhi or to anybody else, you need to give new people chances. It hasn't happened. Now, if Mr. Rahul Gandhi resigned taking responsibility for the defeat, and if you read Rahul's letter carefully, it clearly said, I don't want to come back. I want a non-Gandhi leader. No, and I want the Congress working committee to empower and select a leader.
But that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. Look at it. When Sachin Pilot has to come back to the Congress party today, he has to go back to Rahul and Priyanka to settle the issue. So, he remains de facto your leader.
That's my point. This is creating terrible optics. And I'm being very frank here. I'm meeting a lot of people all over the country who write to me, who talk to me, and whoever I meet in Mumbai, because we can't travel at this point, who tell me that, listen, your perception has got a massive deficit to it. And the only way you can change is let the Gandhis at this point of time, they have huge political brand and capital. Even if he were not the president, Rahul Gandhi will draw massive crowds. He remains humongously popular. Nobody is taking that away from you. But I do believe there comes a time when you give somebody new an opportunity, whether it's Dr. Tharoor or whether it's Sachin Pilot, whether it's XYZ.
Let me take that to Kaushik Dekha, who's tracked the Congress. Is that going to actually ever happen, Kaushik Dekha? Sonia Gandhi now completed 1 year as Congress interim president this weekend, and it appears that she will continue as far as the Congress is concerned till such time as a process is evolved. And if you look at the tracker that India Today has done, Rahul Gandhi at 23%, Sonia Gandhi at 14%, Priyanka Gandhi at 14%. The Gandhis still occupy about 60% or 50% collectively between them. 1 in every 2 still want a Gandhi family member. Can a non-Gandhi person take over the Congress while the Gandhis are still around?
No, as long as they're in active politics, a non-Gandhi would find it very difficult to function within the Congress, because what will happen the moment, even if they elect a non-Gandhi, then those who will be not supporting that person, and definitely any leader who would be the president of the party would not have the 100% members. So others will go around the Gandhis, and Gandhis will always remain a de facto or extra constitutional authority within the party. So in that context, for any non-Gandhi function as a full-time president and a real president, means with effective strength, it would be next to impossible. So either the Gandhis will have to step aside and make it very clear that They would not interfere in the politics the way they do now, or they will have to, any of them, whether it's Sonia Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi, or Rahul Gandhi, either of the cards. But this ambiguity cannot continue. This is damaging the party most as we talk about perception.
Okay, the
creating a lot of trouble.
The ambiguity is damaging the party. That's where leadership comes, Manishankar Iyer. The big question is therefore, who is best suited to take on Modi? You know, let's be honest, Narendra Modi is not Morarji Desai. You today are trying to liken him to Germany and Hitler of 1930s. That's your perception. I am asking you in the Indian context. He is not going anywhere. Our Mood of the Nation poll also shows that Mr. Modi's popularity is still very high. Who is that leader who's going to give you, who's going to offer a credible alternative? Therefore, it's about leadership and ideology. Who is that person who's going to convince young India that I'm the person to take on Mr. Modi and offer you the alternative? Do you see anyone on the horizon?
I don't think this is a personal matter. I think the Congress party as a party is the only viable and credible opponent to the BJP. And just as the BJP has chosen to have Mr. Modi as their leader, we have implicitly chosen any member of the Gandhi family. All the dissatisfaction that you personally in your questions, I'm not saying those are your answers, but in your questions, you seem to assume that Mrs. Gandhi is sitting there as an interim president because she wants to. It's not true. It's we who want her to. And if we collectively, as you just pointed out, want 60% to have one of the three Gandhis, well, what's your problem?
No, I have no problem. I have no problem. It is your party, sir. You can decide your leader. All I am saying is that also the harsh reality, therefore, is that while the Congress vote across the country has remained static between 9 crores to 11 crores, the BJP vote between 2009 to 19 nationally has gone up from 9 crores to 22 crores. This is a reality.
What? Why are you so mesmerized?
I'm not mesmerized. I'm telling you the truth.
No, you are.
No, I'm not.
My
job is to show you the objective reality. I'm asking you, what's your solution? You don't seem to have a recipe.
May I give you the objective reality? The objective reality was that in 2009, instead of diminishing because we'd been in power,
yes,
we actually increased our number of seats beyond 200. So these things happen in politics. What we need is a party that in every constituency and all over the country will have clear objectives clearly articulated on how to oppose what the BJP stands for and what the BJP is saying. As far as we are concerned, we are completely convinced that our party must be led by one of the Gandhis. And I say, as one of the suspended members of the Congress, as I was described recently, that whatever my diminished personal relationship with the Gandhi family, as a congressman, I'm completely convinced that if anybody else was given this post in a situation where any of the three Gandhis is ready to take over, our party will splinter into several fractions.
So you believe that the Gandhis hold the party together. The flip side, Sanjay Jha, is they allowed Mr. Modi and the BJP to play Kamdar versus Namdar politics, the meritocrat versus the dynast. And the Congress doesn't seem to recognize it. When Manishankar Iyer today says on the program that he believes, and he's as intelligent a congressman as one can write, believes that only the Gandhi family can hold it together. Do you believe that? That only the Gandhis can hold their party together?
With due respects to Mr. Iyer, and I have enormous, kind of respect for him, I disagree with that proposition. Because you will never know whether the party will break up, disintegrate, and destroy itself until you test it, right?
Right.
And until you test the waters, you will never know. So this is all in the realm of speculation. And I do believe that this is a grand myth. And I'll tell you why it's a grand myth. Because if you look at the Congress party over the last 2 decades, and Rajdeep, you look at the way we have diminished all over the country. West Bengal, Tamil Nadu may have happened a little earlier. Odisha, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, there are certain states we never come back in at all. I mean, somebody has to take up responsibility. I wrote an article recently, Rajdeep, where I linked the corporate leadership example to the political accountability. And I don't believe they should be very different. If you are not good enough, you should be as good as your last year. And if you didn't deserve in the last elections, give space to somebody else. And I can promise you, there are people who are hungry within the party who can, possibly demonstrate their talent and skills.
Break into factions. It will break into factions. They'll fight with each other. We've just seen in Rajasthan between Gehlot and Pilot. You'll have Gehlots and Pilots all across. Your party will splinter.
Let me tell you, the truth is that ultimately, I don't believe that if there's a non-Gandhi president of the Congress party, I don't believe Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, Rahul or Priyanka will say, now let throw them to the wolves and, let them be consumed in a bloody duel. That's not going to happen, because I'm sure they have a greater political commitment to the Congress party, given their own sacrifices the family has made. I think the larger point is Mr. Modi. To defeat Mr. Modi, and let's not be in denial, members of the Congress party, Mr. Modi is a formidable, outstanding politician. He is great in brand building, and he manages the communication so brilliantly that although there's been dysfunctional governance for the last 1 year, the country is still singing Mr. Modi's paeans.
Okay,
and I think that, to me, is a message for the Congress party.
Let's leave it there, because clearly we've had different viewpoints on this issue. Remember, you can read much more about it in India Today's Mood of the Nation that has triggered off so much of debate. We put out the numbers. We leave you to do the debate. Manisha Garai, Sanjay Jha, Kaushik Deka, thanks very much for joining me at the moment. I want to move from there to the big story that's breaking. The breaking news that's coming in: Rhea Chakraborty's grilling by the Enforcement Directorate has ended in Mumbai. ED has grilled Rhea Chakraborty and family for 10 hours over her income and investments in the past 2 years. Rhea, Shovik and their father left. But the big news coming in is that according to ED sources, no incriminating evidence has been found. This is what our reporters are claiming based on their ED sources. No incriminating evidence found so far against Rhea Chakraborty. Divyesh Singh is joining me at this moment. Divyesh, tell us more. Is that true that the ED still hasn't found any smoking gun?
Yes, Rajdeep, ED is still looking for the incriminating evidence that they have been looking for when they registered this ECIR. They've almost grilled Rhea for around 19 hours now, but they are yet to get any crucial leads in this case. ED sources claim that Rhea hasn't been responding, hasn't been giving satisfactory answers to whatever queries are posed to her. Also, she's not responded on many investment-related queries that were asked. Other than that, the mobile data of her mobile phone was scanned today. Shovik, her brother, his mobile was also scanned, and these will be analyzed. Other than that, the ITR details were scanned. Rhea was questioned regarding the ITR returns of 2017-18 and 2018-19, where one can see that the income source had dropped down, but the net values had increased. She was also holding 34 shares worth 34 lakhs, and she was questioned regarding that as well. But sources are claiming that she's yet to respond, and that is why she will be called again for questioning, and maybe she could be called on Wednesday for questioning again.
Okay, Divyesh Singh is joining us with the very latest on that ED questioning of Rhea Chakraborty. Remember, the case comes up in the Supreme Court, where Rhea has moved a petition saying that the matter should be investigated only by the Mumbai police. Let's take a break.